The day my sister was sent to a secure mental health facility, my mother contacted me for the first time in 10 years. She wrote, "We miss you." Then she asked, "Can we be a family again?" I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. The message was from my mother. She said she and my father missed me, loved me, and wanted to repair our relationship. She didn't mention the hospital where I had finally told the truth. She didn't mention the 10 years they had spent without contacting me. She called what happened between us a family disagreement. I was 21. I had last seen them when I was 11 after authorities removed me from their home because my older sister had seriously injured me. For a decade, my parents had sent no letters, birthday cards, or requests to see me. Then my sister was ordered into a secure mental health facility, and they suddenly wanted to be a family again. I didn't answer. 3 days later, my father wrote to me, "Your mother is struggling. Please don't punish her forever." The following week, my mother tried again. "We know mistakes were made. We want the chance to explain." Their wording changed, but their messages always avoided the same thing. Responsibility. My parents originally had 3 children. Their first child, my brother Evan, died from cancer when he was a year old. My sister Megan was 3 at the time, and my mother was pregnant with me. I never met Evan, but his absence shaped our entire home. His photographs covered one side of the living room. My mother kept his hospital bracelet in a wooden box that no one was allowed to touch. Every year on his birthday, she baked a cake and left it on the kitchen table. No one ate it. My parents never recovered from losing him. Their grief made them terrified of losing another child, which became their reason for ignoring what was happening with Megan. Relatives later told me she had shown troubling behavior from an early age. She struggled around other children, became suspicious of people, and sometimes insisted that classmates or relatives were whispering about her. By the time she was 7 or 8, her behavior had become harder to dismiss. She had sudden outbursts, destroyed things around the house, and spoke to people no one else could see. There were also disturbing incidents involving animals. My parents always found another explanation. They said she was grieving for Evan, jealous of me, sensitive, or being misunderstood. When teachers suggested professional help, my mother accused them of labeling her. When relatives raised concerns, my father told them to stay out of our family's business. They believed protecting Megan meant keeping everything hidden. Megan was 3 years older than me. When I was small, that difference made her seem enormous. She would corner me in the hallway and accuse me of things I hadn't done. "What did you tell them?" she would ask. "I didn't tell anyone anything." "I heard you." "I wasn't talking." "You think I'm stupid?" Sometimes she insisted I had moved her belongings. Other times she claimed I was speaking about her through the walls. I rarely understood what she thought I had done. Defending myself usually made her angrier, so I learned to stay quiet. It didn't always help. She pushed me into furniture, twisted my arms, and trapped me inside rooms. Once, she stood outside my bedroom holding scissors and whispered that she knew what I was planning. I was 6 years old. I had no idea what she meant. My parents saw the bruises and noticed that I barely slept, but they focused on whether anyone else knew. My mother would kneel in front of me and hold my hands. "You know your sister isn't well," she would say. "She doesn't understand what she's doing. She keeps hurting me." "I know, sweetheart. I don't want to be alone with her." That was when my mother would start crying. "We already lost Evan. We cannot lose Megan too." My father was more direct. "This stays inside the family. People won't understand, and they'll take her away." At school, I said I had fallen from my bicycle or tripped on the stairs. I repeated whatever explanation my parents gave me before I left the house. One teacher asked why I looked exhausted every morning. I said I had nightmares. The truth was that I listened for Megan's footsteps at night. Every sound in the hallway made me hold my breath. I started pushing a chair against my bedroom door before I slept. It wouldn't have stopped anyone, but I hoped the noise would wake me if someone tried to enter. My father found it one morning and removed it. "Stop being dramatic," he said. After that, I waited until everyone was asleep before putting it back. My mother's relatives knew something was wrong. They visited less often as Megan grew older. My cousins were no longer allowed to stay overnight, and family gatherings were held anywhere except our house. The final break came after an incident involving my cousin Natalie's rabbit. I didn't see exactly what happened. I only knew the rabbit didn't survive and Megan was responsible. My Aunt Janet took Natalie outside while my mother followed them into the driveway. "You need to get her help," Janet shouted. "She's a child," my mother replied. "So are the rest of them. You don't understand what she's been through." "And Rachel?" Janet asked. "What has Rachel been through?" I was listening from inside the house. My mother saw me and closed the door. After that, Janet stopped bringing Natalie around. A few months later, my parents left Megan and me alone. Megan was upstairs, pacing and talking to herself. I could hear objects hitting the wall. I called Janet. "Can I stay with you tonight?" I whispered. "Where are your parents?" "They went out." "Is Megan hurting you?" "Not yet." Janet told me to lock myself in my bedroom and wait for my parents. She didn't come. Years later, she apologized and said she had been afraid that challenging my parents would make them cut off the family completely. At the time, I only knew that she understood I was afraid and still left me there. My father's parents, Helen and Paul, were not part of our lives. My parents had stopped speaking to them around the time I was born. I never learned the full reason. Birthday cards occasionally arrived, but my father usually took them before I could open them. He described his parents as controlling. My mother said they had never respected our family. I believed them because I had no other version of the story. By the time I was 11, Megan's condition had worsened. She had begun injuring herself and hiding sharp objects in her room. My parents found some of them, removed them, and continued trying to manage her alone. They didn't warn me when she was having a bad day. They expected me to recognize the danger and stay out of her way. One afternoon, I came home from school and immediately knew something was wrong. The house was silent. My mother's car was gone, but Megan's shoes were beside the front door. Her bedroom door was open. I called her name. She didn't answer. I walked into the kitchen and placed my backpack on the counter. My metal water bottle slipped from the side pocket and struck the floor. The sound echoed through the house. Megan appeared in the doorway. Her hair was tangled, and one hand was held close to her side. "You did that on purpose," she said. "It fell." "You're signaling them." "Signaling who?" "Don't lie to me." I backed toward the hallway. "I'm going to my room." She stepped between me and the stairs. "You think they're coming for me?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Her eyes moved toward the empty space behind me. Then she answered someone who wasn't there. "No. She knows." I ran for the front door. I almost reached it before she caught me. The next few moments returned later in fragments, my shoulder striking the wall, Megan shouting words I couldn't understand, and a sudden pain in my upper arm. Then my mother came through the door and screamed. At the hospital, my parents tried to control the story before anyone could speak to me privately. My father told a nurse it had been an accident. My mother said Megan had panicked and didn't understand what she was holding. When the nurse asked me what happened, my father answered for me. She startled her sister. There was a struggle. The nurse looked directly at me. "Is that what happened?" Before I could speak, my mother squeezed my hand. "She's exhausted," she said. "She doesn't need to be questioned right now." A hospital social worker named Monica arrived soon afterward and asked my parents to leave the room. My father refused. "This is a family matter. Your daughter needs to be interviewed alone," Monica replied. Before he left, he gave me a look I recognized. It was a warning to remember what happened when I embarrassed the family. Monica sat beside the bed after the door closed. "Do you feel safe at home?" she asked. I looked toward the door and started crying. Everything I had hidden came out at once. I told her about Megan's accusations, the bruises, the objects hidden in her room, and the chair against my door. I admitted that my parents had taught me to lie whenever adults asked questions. I also told her I was afraid my parents would hate me if Megan was taken away. Monica listened without making excuses for anyone. It was the first time an adult had allowed my fear to matter on its own. Child protection became involved before I left the hospital. When my parents returned to the room, my mother was crying. "Why would you say those things?" she asked. "Because they happened. We could have handled this as a family. You didn't. She needs us." "So do I." My father told me to stop talking. Monica stepped between him and the bed. His expression changed immediately. His voice became calm and controlled. "We have been dealing with a deeply troubled child," he said. "Rachel doesn't understand the pressure this family has been under." I understood enough. That night, I was placed in temporary foster care. I later learned that Megan might have been removed from the house briefly, but she eventually returned to my parents. I didn't. A few weeks later, my caseworker located Helen and Paul. I was terrified before meeting them. I expected them to question me or accuse me of exaggerating. Helen entered the visitation room first. When she saw the bandage on my arm, she covered her mouth. Paul sat near me but didn't try to touch me until I reached for his hand. "We didn't know," Helen said. I believed her. My father had told them we were healthy and happy while refusing every request they made to see us. When they learned the truth, they agreed to take me in. There was a confrontation between them and my parents during one of the custody meetings. I was taken into the hallway, but I could hear the raised voices through the wall. My father accused Paul of stealing his daughter. Paul answered, "You abandoned her long before she left your house." My mother said they were tearing the family apart. Helen replied, "There was no safe family left for Rachel to return to. My parents were given approved ways to contact me, but they never used them." For years, I wondered whether their silence was punishment. Maybe they expected me to apologize for telling the truth, or perhaps life was easier without me there because no one had to explain my injuries anymore. Helen and Paul helped me adjust to a home where I wasn't expected to manage someone else's behavior. During my first week with them, Helen found a chair wedged beneath my doorknob. She didn't remove it. "Would a lock make you feel safer?" she asked. The next day, Paul installed one and handed me the key. "No one comes in unless you say so." I cried because it was the first time an adult had changed something to make me feel safe instead of telling me to tolerate the danger. I attended therapy for most of my teenage years. Gradually, I stopped checking every room before entering. I learned that raised voices didn't always lead to violence and that someone else's anger was not automatically my responsibility. At 18, I stopped going. I wasn't completely healed. I was simply tired of building my entire identity around what had happened. Then, about a year ago, I saw Megan's name in an online news report. She had been arrested after a serious public incident in which several people were hurt. Witnesses said she appeared confused and believed strangers were conspiring against her. I followed every update. Part of me needed to know where she was. For 10 years, I had worried that she might find me through someone we both knew. Seeing her photograph brought that fear back instantly. I locked my door, closed the curtains, and called Helen. She stayed on the phone until I could breathe normally again. Megan's case took months. Her lawyers argued that she needed treatment. The court also had to consider the seriousness of what had happened and whether she remained a risk to others. She was eventually found guilty and ordered into a secure mental health facility rather than an ordinary prison. When I read the decision, I felt relieved. She was finally somewhere with trained staff who could treat her while protecting the people around her. It was what should have happened years earlier. 2 days later, my mother asked whether we could finally be a family again. I ignored her first messages. After she contacted me several more times, I responded with one question. "What exactly are you apologizing for?" She replied almost immediately. "For everything that happened between us." That isn't an answer. Her next response took longer. "We know your childhood was difficult, but we were doing our best in an impossible situation." It wasn't an apology. It was a defense. I asked whether she had known Megan was hurting me. "Yes, but she was very ill." "Did you ask me to lie about it?" "We were afraid the authorities would separate the family." "Why did you keep Megan after I was removed?" "She needed us." I stopped typing. That answer explained everything. Protecting me would have required my parents to admit that they could not safely manage Megan on their own. Instead, they made me responsible for surviving around her. My father called before I could respond again. I almost let it ring, but I answered. Neither of us spoke at first. His voice sounded older when he finally said my name. "Rachel. What do you want?" "I want my daughter back." "You haven't had me for 10 years. That wasn't entirely our decision. You never contacted me. We were advised to give you space. For 10 years. You were angry. I was 11. He sighed. "We were all dealing with something terrible. You were the adults." After a long silence, he said, "You need to understand what losing Evan did to your mother." "I do understand. I spent my childhood being told to understand both of you. That isn't fair." "What isn't fair?" "Reducing everything we did to one mistake." "One mistake." My hand tightened around the phone. "You watched me hide injuries. You taught me to lie. You left me alone with Megan after you knew she was getting worse. When I finally told the truth, you disappeared. We were trying to save your sister. And what did you think would happen to me?" He didn't answer. I heard my mother speaking in the background. A moment later, she took the phone. "We can't change the past," she said. "No. But we can move forward." "Why no?" "Because we've lost too much time." "Why did you contact me 2 days after Megan was sent away?" Her breathing changed. "Everything has been very difficult." That still isn't an answer. Then she finally gave me one. "The house is empty." For 10 years, they had lived without me. Now Megan was gone, Evan had been gone for decades, and their house was quiet. They had not reached out because they had finally understood what they did. They had reached out because I was the only child still available to them. My mother continued. We've lost all 3 of our children. You didn't lose me, I said. You chose not to protect me, and then you let 10 years pass without trying to make it right. That isn't what happened. She was sick, Rachel. I know. You speak as if she chose to be that way. I never said that. Then you should understand why we couldn't abandon her. I looked around my apartment. The door was locked, the curtains were open, and sunlight stretched across the floor. I'm not angry because you loved Megan, I said. I'm angry because you used that love as a reason not to protect me. My mother began crying. When I was a child, that sound would have made me apologize. I would have taken back whatever I said and promised to keep quiet. This time I waited. My father took the phone again. You're upsetting your mother. I spent most of my childhood afraid. We said we're sorry. No. You said mistakes were made. What do you want from us? I had imagined that question for years, but I still didn't have an answer. An apology could not return the nights I was afraid to sleep. It could not change the hospital or erase the moment I realized my parents were more frightened of losing Megan than of losing me. I don't know, I said. Then how are we supposed to fix this? I didn't ask you to. I ended the call. My father sent one final message the next morning. We'll be here when you're ready to stop living in the past. I blocked his number. I haven't blocked my mother. Part of me may still be waiting for her to say what I needed to hear when I was 11, that they knew, that they failed me, and that none of it was my fault. Helen thinks I should protect the life I built without them. Paul says loneliness is not the same as remorse. Sometimes I imagine meeting my mother somewhere quiet and hearing what she has to say. Then I remember her first question at the hospital. She didn't ask whether I was safe or whether I was in pain. She asked why I had told. I understand that Megan was seriously ill and needed treatment. I also understand that losing Evan changed my parents. But I was their child too. My mother's last message is still sitting unanswered on my phone. Some days, I think about meeting her, just once, to see whether she can finally say the words she has avoided for 10 years. Other days, I remember the hospital and how her first concern wasn't whether I was safe. It was why I had told the truth. Maybe people can change. Maybe regret only arrives when there is no one left to blame. I still don't know which one brought my parents back. They spent my childhood asking me to stay silent for the sake of the family. Now the silence is mine. But if you were in my place, would you answer them?